Rachel Chen sat in her car outside the cafe, staring at the steering wheel she could no longer use. Well, technically it wasn't her car anymore. It was the adapted van her insurance company had bought her after the accident, the one with hand controls and a wheelchair ramp that folded out like some kind of mechanical apology for everything she'd lost. She didn't want to go inside. She didn't want to be here at all. Her phone buzzed for the third time. Another text from Lisa, her best friend since college. The same Lisa who had somehow decided that what Rachel needed right now, 8 months after her entire life fell apart, was a blind date. He's already inside. Table by the window. Please just give it an hour. For me? Rachel closed her eyes and took a slow breath. The doctors had taught her breathing exercises for the pain. Turned out they worked pretty well for anger too, though not quite as well as she'd hoped. She'd already tried every excuse. She had physical therapy. She had work. She had a headache. She had a meeting. Lisa had an answer for everything. The therapy was in the morning, not evening. Rachel had been working from home for months and barely left her apartment. The headache was probably from not leaving her apartment. The meeting could be rescheduled. Finally, Rachel had run out of excuses that didn't involve telling her best friend the actual truth, which was that she couldn't imagine why any man would want to go on a date with her now. Before the accident, sure. Back when she was the 32-year-old CEO of a growing tech company, when she wore power suits and 4-inch heels and walked into investor meetings like she owned the room. Back when her legs worked, now she was the woman people stared at in grocery stores. The one they spoke to in that special voice, a little too loud and a little too slow, like her spine injury had somehow affected her hearing and intelligence. But Lisa wouldn't let it go, and Rachel was tired of fighting. So here she was, sitting outside a cafe she used to love, about to wheel herself inside to meet some guy who probably felt sorry for her. The ramp on her van lowered with a mechanical whir that seemed way too loud in the quiet parking lot. Rachel transferred to her wheelchair with practiced movements that still felt foreign even after 8 months. Everything took longer now. Everything required planning. A quick coffee date meant making sure the cafe had an accessible entrance, an accessible bathroom, enough space between tables for her to maneuver. She'd called ahead yesterday. The teenage kid who answered the phone had sounded confused by her questions, like nobody had ever asked about wheelchair access before. That probably should have been her first clue that this was a bad idea. The cafe door was heavy, but at least it opened outward. Small victories. Inside, the late afternoon crowd was thin. A couple of college students with laptops in the corner, an older woman reading a paperback by the counter, and there by the window, exactly where Lisa said he'd be, sat a man who definitely did not look like any of the guys Lisa usually knew. Rachel's social circle, before the accident, had been venture capitalists in expensive suits, tech entrepreneurs with carefully styled hair, business school graduates who used words like synergy without irony. This man wore a faded denim jacket over a dark t-shirt. His hands wrapped around a coffee mug looked rough, like they'd actually worked for a living. There was something under his fingernails that might have been grease or dirt. She couldn't tell from here. She sat frozen in the doorway, confusion mixing with something close to relief. This couldn't be her date. Lisa must have given her the wrong table. This guy was probably a construction worker or a delivery person, just grabbing a quick coffee before his next job. But then he looked up, made direct eye contact, and smiled. Not the pitying smile she'd gotten used to. Not the uncomfortable smile people gave her when they weren't sure where to look. Just a regular smile, like she was a regular person walking into a cafe. Except she wasn't walking, and that smile suddenly felt worse than pity. He stood up and started walking toward her. Rachel's mind raced. Should she leave? Should she pretend she was meeting someone else? Should she text Lisa and demand to know what kind of joke this was? Rachel Chen? He asked, still smiling. I'm Tom Rivera. I think we're supposed to have coffee together. He held out his hand. Rachel stared at it. There was definitely grease under his fingernails. Motor oil, probably. She'd grown up around her dad's garage before he sold it and retired. She knew that smell. Faint but unmistakable. I'm sorry, she said, her voice coming out colder than she'd intended. I think there's been some kind of mistake. No mistake. Tom's hand was still extended, patient. Lisa set this up. Said you might try to back out at the last minute, actually. She made me promise to buy you coffee even if you only stayed 5 minutes. Rachel's face went hot. So Lisa had warned him. Probably told him everything. Poor Rachel, she's having such a hard time. She's so depressed she never leaves the house. Be nice to her. Feel sorry for her. Look, Rachel said, keeping her voice low. I don't know what Lisa told you or why you agreed to this, but I'm really not interested in a pity date. Tom finally lowered his hand, but his expression didn't change. If anything, he looked amused. Pity date? I run an auto shop in East Valley. I work 60-hour weeks with my hands covered in engine grease. You think I have time for pity dates? Lisa said you were smart and needed a distraction. I said I could use advice from someone who knows about business. Seemed like a fair trade. He turned and walked back to the table, leaving Rachel sitting in the doorway with her mouth slightly open. After a moment of hesitation that felt much longer than it probably was, she wheeled herself forward. The space between tables was tight, and she had to angle herself awkwardly to get to the window seat. Tom watched but didn't offer to help, which Rachel found both irritating and oddly respectful. So, Tom said, settling back into his chair, Lisa said you used to run a tech company. Something about software for inventory management, supply chain optimization. Rachel heard herself answering automatically, the old professional instinct kicking in. We helped mid-size retailers track inventory in real time across multiple locations. Reduced overhead, prevented stockouts, that kind of thing. Used to run? Rachel's jaw tightened. I still own the company. I'm just not as involved in day-to-day operations anymore. She waited for the sympathetic head tilt, the careful change of subject. Instead, Tom nodded like she'd said something completely ordinary. Makes sense. My old man used to say the best business owners are the ones who build something that runs without them hovering over it constantly. Means you did it right. He took a sip of his coffee. So you've got time to look at other projects now? Is this the part where you pitch me your business idea? Rachel asked, unable to keep the edge out of her voice. Maybe. You hungry? They make pretty good sandwiches here. Before Rachel could answer, a server appeared at their table with 2 menus. She was young, maybe 19, and her eyes went straight to Rachel's wheelchair with barely concealed curiosity. Rachel braced herself for the too loud voice, the unnecessary assistance. Hi there, what can I get you folks today? The server addressed her question to Tom, not Rachel. It was such a small thing, such a common thing that happened now, but it still made Rachel's chest tight with frustration. I'll have the turkey club, Tom said, then looked at Rachel. What about you? The server's eyes finally moved to Rachel, waiting. Same thing. And coffee. Black. Rachel's voice came out sharper than the situation called for, and the server blinked, startled. Sure thing. I'll get those right out. She disappeared toward the counter, and an awkward silence settled over the table. Sorry, Rachel muttered, not looking at Tom. Long day. Don't apologize. People can be idiots. Tom leaned back in his chair. When my mom first moved here from Puerto Rico, people used to talk to my dad like she wasn't standing right there. Like she couldn't understand English. She spoke better English than half the people in our neighborhood, but they'd see her accent and just assume. Made her crazy. Rachel looked up, surprised. Tom was still relaxed, not making a big deal out of it, just stating a fact. Anyway, he continued, I wasn't kidding about the business thing. I've got a shop, Rivera Auto Repair. Been in my family for 27 years. My old man built it from nothing, and when he died 3 years ago, it almost went under. I've got it stable now, but I want to grow, maybe open a second location. But every time I try to look at expansion plans or business loans or any of that stuff, my brain turns to mush. I'm good with cars. I'm not good with spreadsheets. So you want free consulting? Rachel asked, but there was less bite in her voice now. I want to trade. I'll buy you dinner once a week. You tell me if my ideas are stupid. Seems fair. Their sandwiches arrived, and for a few minutes they ate in silence. Rachel found herself studying Tom when she thought he wasn't looking. He didn't fit any category she knew. He wasn't polished like her business associates. He wasn't awkward like the guys Lisa usually tried to set her up with. He was just comfortable in his own skin in a way that Rachel hadn't felt in almost a year. So how does someone go from tech CEO to having coffee with a mechanic? Tom asked suddenly. Lisa said there was an accident but didn't give me details. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. Rachel's automatic response was to shut down, to change the subject, to do what she'd done for 8 months whenever anyone asked about the accident. But something about the direct question, asked without any special gentleness or hedging, made her pause. Drunk driver, she said. T-boned me at an intersection. Broke my spine. The doctors said I might walk again someday with therapy and surgery, but probably not. She took a breath. That was 8 months ago. I've been living in my apartment mostly, working remotely when I can focus, which isn't often, and ignoring Lisa's calls until she threatened to show up at my door and drag me out physically. Tom nodded slowly. That sounds terrible. Yeah. Rachel waited for more. For the speech about how she was so strong, so brave, so inspiring. For the story about someone's cousin's friend who was in a wheelchair and ran marathons now. For anything except what Tom actually said next. Have you ever rebuilt a carburetor? Rachel stared at him. What? A carburetor? It's a part in older cars that mixes air and fuel. Have you ever taken one apart and put it back together? I know what a carburetor is, Rachel said, thrown completely off balance. My dad had a garage when I was a kid. And no, I never rebuilt one. Why? Because it's basically impossible the first time you try. All these tiny parts, springs everywhere. Nothing works the way you think it should. And even if you get it back together, it probably won't work right away. You've got to adjust it, tune it, sometimes take it apart again. Tom finished his coffee. My old man used to say that's what life is. You're constantly rebuilding the carburetor. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you've got to start over. But the point is, you keep trying to make it run. Rachel didn't know what to say. It was possibly the weirdest metaphor anyone had ever used in conversation with her, and she'd sat through countless pitch meetings with tech bros who compared their apps to everything from evolution to quantum physics. That's very philosophical for a mechanic, she finally said. I read. Tom grinned. Also, I watch a lot of YouTube videos about business strategy at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep. Does that count? And then something unexpected happened. Rachel felt her mouth twitch. Just a little. The tiny beginning of what might have been a smile. She tried to stop it, tried to hold on to the protective armor of irritation and grief she'd worn for 8 months. But the image of this grease-stained mechanic watching business strategy videos in the middle of the night was absurdly funny. The smile broke through. Small, brief, but real, Tom noticed. She could tell by the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners, pleased but not making a big deal of it. So, he said, pulling out his phone, you want to see photos of the absolute disaster that is my current filing system? Because I'm pretty sure I'm doing taxes wrong, and I really don't want to go to jail. Rachel surprised herself by saying yes. For the next hour, they sat in that cafe while Tom showed her pictures of his shop. His paperwork system that seemed to involve a lot of loose receipts and hope, and his half-formed plans for expansion. Rachel found her brain engaging in a way it hadn't in months. She asked questions. She pointed out obvious problems. She suggested solutions. And slowly, without meaning to, she forgot to be miserable. When Tom finally checked his watch and said he had to get back to the shop to close up, Rachel realized the cafe was nearly empty. The sun was setting outside the window. They'd been there for almost 3 hours. So, Tom said, standing up, can I text you? About the business stuff, I mean. I've got some specific questions about pricing strategies. Rachel looked up at him, and for the first time since the accident, she felt something other than hollow. She felt curious, interested, maybe even a tiny bit hopeful. Yeah, she said. You can text me. Tom smiled that same easy smile from when he'd first walked over. Good. Also, for what it's worth, Lisa was right. You are smart, and you needed a distraction. He pulled on his jacket. See you around, Rachel Chen. He left before she could respond, the cafe door swinging shut behind him. Rachel sat alone at the table for a long moment, staring at the empty coffee cups and scattered sandwich crumbs. Then she pulled out her phone and texted Lisa, I'm going to kill you for this. 3 dots appeared immediately, then Lisa's response, but you stayed the whole time. Did you smile? Rachel's thumbs hovered over the keyboard. She thought about lying. Then she typed the truth. Once, maybe twice. That's the most you've smiled in 8 months. You're welcome. He's texting you again, isn't he? Rachel looked at her phone. There was already a new message from an unknown number. Is this really Rachel, or did you give me a fake number? Also, serious question. What's the difference between gross profit and net profit? YouTube is giving me conflicting answers. Despite everything, despite the wheelchair and the pain and the 8 months of darkness, Rachel felt that small smile return. Yeah, she texted Lisa back. He's texting me. She wheeled herself toward the door, and for the first time in a very long time, She was already thinking about tomorrow instead of yesterday. Rachel told herself she was only responding to Tom's texts because she was bored. That's what she told Lisa when her friend called the next morning, barely containing her excitement. That's what she told herself when she found herself smiling at her phone at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Okay, so I watched 3 more videos about profit margins and now I'm more confused. Is a 20% markup good? Or am I getting robbed by my parts supplier? Rachel typed back quickly. Depends on your industry standard and overhead costs. What are you paying per unit versus selling price? She stared at her response. Too formal. Too corporate. She deleted it and tried again. You're probably getting robbed. Most auto shops aim for 30 to 40% on parts. What's your supplier charging? Better, more casual. She hit send before she could overthink it. The texts continued like that for 3 days. Tom would send her questions at random times. Early morning before he opened the shop. Late at night after he closed. Once at 2 in the afternoon with a photo of a spreadsheet that looked like it had been created by someone who'd never seen a spreadsheet before. I think I broke Excel, the message said. Is it supposed to do this? The attached image showed a chaos of merged cells, random colors, and formulas that made no mathematical sense. Rachel actually laughed out loud. Her home health aide, Diane, looked up from her magazine in surprise. What's funny? Diane asked. Nothing, Rachel said quickly, but she couldn't stop smiling. Diane raised an eyebrow. She'd been coming 3 times a week for 6 months, helping Rachel with things she still struggled to do alone. They'd developed an easy friendship, the kind that happens when someone sees you at your worst and sticks around anyway. That's not a nothing face, Diane said. That's a something face. Who are you texting? Just a friend. A friend who makes you smile like that? Honey, I've been working with you since April. I've seen you smile maybe twice, and both times it looked like it hurt. This is different, Rachel felt her cheeks warm. Lisa set me up on a blind date. It was terrible. But he keeps texting me about business stuff. Business stuff that makes you giggle at your phone. I don't giggle. You just giggled. Rachel opened her mouth to argue, then realized Diane was right. She'd actually giggled. When had she last done that? By Friday, Tom's texts had evolved from business questions to something else. Random observations about his day. A photo of a customer's car with a bumper sticker that said, "My other car is also a piece of junk." A complaint about his supplier being late with a parts delivery. Rachel found herself responding with her own observations. The physical therapist who talked too much. The way her morning coffee always got cold because everything took longer now. Small things. Normal things. The kind of things she used to share with colleagues and friends before the accident, before she'd isolated herself in her apartment and stopped returning calls. So random question. Tom texted on Saturday morning. You want to come see the shop? I'm serious about getting your advice on the expansion thing. Plus I make pretty good lunch. Cuban sandwiches. My mom's recipe. Rachel stared at the message for a full minute. This was different from texting. This was real interaction. This meant leaving her apartment again, navigating the world in her wheelchair, dealing with stairs and narrow doorways and people's stares. Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard. She started typing, "I don't think that's a good idea," 3 times and deleted it 3 times. Finally, she wrote, "Is your shop wheelchair accessible?" "Yeah. My old man's best friend Eddie used a walker the last few years before he passed. We put in ramps and widened the bathroom door. When do you want to come by?" Rachel took a breath. "Today?" The response came immediately. "Perfect. I'll text you the address. Come around noon. And don't worry about the mess. It's always a mess." Tom hadn't been kidding about the mess. When Rachel's van pulled up to Rivera Auto Repair, she could see through the open bay doors into what looked like organized chaos. 3 cars in various states of disassembly. Tools hanging on pegboards that seemed to follow no particular system. A radio playing classic rock loud enough to hear from the parking lot. A man in coveralls emerged from under a car on a creeper, saw her van, and shouted something toward the back of the shop. A moment later, Tom appeared, wiping his hands on a rag that might have been blue once but was now mostly black with grease. He walked over to her van as she lowered the ramp, and Rachel noticed he'd cleaned up a bit. Different shirt at least, though it already had a smudge of oil on the shoulder. "You made it," he said. and his smile was so genuinely pleased that Rachel felt something warm spread through her chest. Fair warning, it's loud in there, and it smells like motor oil and brake fluid, and my crew has no filter when it comes to language. I grew up in a garage, Rachel reminded him. I think I can handle it. Right, okay then. Come meet the guys. The shop was bigger inside than it looked from the outside. 3 bays, each with a lift. The guy who'd been on the creeper was already back under his car. Another man, younger, maybe mid-20s, was doing something complicated with an engine block on a workbench. A third guy, older with completely gray hair, was at a computer in the corner squinting at the screen like it had personally offended him. "Hey," Tom shouted over the music. Nobody looked up. He walked over to the radio and turned it down. 3 heads swiveled toward him with identical expressions of betrayal. "Come on, boss," the young guy said. "That was the good part. We have a guest. Be civilized for 5 minutes." Tom gestured to Rachel. "This is Rachel. She's going to help us figure out if we're running this place like idiots or just regular idiots. Rachel, this is my crew. That's Danny under the Civic. That's Carlos with the engine. And that's Eddie Jr. on the computer, trying to figure out why our scheduling software hates us." "It's the computer that hates me," Eddie Jr. muttered. "I keep telling you we should go back to paper." Carlos wiped his hands and walked over, extending a fist for Rachel to bump. "Nice to meet you. Tom said you used to run a whole company. What are you doing slumming it with us?" "Taking pity on your boss," Rachel said, and Carlos laughed. "Yeah, he needs it. You see his filing system yet? It's a disaster. I've seen pictures. It's bad." "Hey," Tom protested. "It works." "It works until the tax people show up," Danny called from under the car. "Then we're all going to jail." Rachel found herself smiling again. There was something comfortable about this place, despite the noise and the smell and the chaos. Nobody was treating her wheelchair like it was the most interesting thing about her. Nobody was speaking slowly or offering help she didn't ask for. They were just guys working on cars, and she was just someone who'd stopped by. Tom led her toward a small office in the back corner. "Sorry about them. They're good mechanics, but they've got the manners of feral cats. They seem nice, they are nice. They're just also weird." He opened the office door. "Okay, so this is where the magic happens. And by magic I mean where I stare at paperwork and pray it makes sense." The office was exactly what Rachel expected. A desk covered in papers, invoices, receipts, and empty coffee cups. A filing cabinet that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. A calendar on the wall that was still showing March even though it was October. "I know," Tom said, seeing her expression. "It's bad. It's not great," Rachel agreed. She wheeled closer to the desk. "Can I, please? Tell me how to fix my life." For the next hour, Rachel went through his paperwork while Tom sat on the edge of the desk and answered questions. It was worse than she'd thought. His filing system was basically no system at all. He had receipts mixed with invoices mixed with personal mail. His inventory tracking was done on paper, when he remembered to do it at all. His pricing was inconsistent, apparently based on whatever he felt like charging that day. But underneath the chaos, Rachel could see something solid. His customer base was loyal. His revenue was steady. His expenses were actually pretty reasonable. He wasn't failing. He was just disorganized. "Okay," she said finally. "The good news is you're not going bankrupt. The bad news is you're probably losing money in about 15 different ways and you don't even know it." Tom winced. "How much money?" "Hard to say without doing a full audit, but probably thousands a year just in poor inventory management. You're ordering parts last minute, paying rush fees, not taking advantage of bulk discounts." She pulled up a spreadsheet on her phone and started making notes. "You need a real system. Software that tracks everything. Inventory, appointments, invoicing, all of it. I have scheduling software. You have software from 2015 that Eddie Jr. hates. You need something modern. Cloud-based. Something that connects to your accounting." Tom rubbed his face. "This is why I ask for help. Every time I look at this stuff, my brain shuts down. Because you're trying to learn everything at once. You need to break it into steps." Rachel was in her element now, the part of her brain that had built a company from nothing clicking into gear. First step, get your paperwork organized. Shouldn't take more than a week if you dedicate an hour a day. Second step, research inventory management systems. I can send you some options. Third step, we look at your expansion plans and see if they make sense. Rachel paused. "I mean, if you want help. I'm not trying to take over your business." "No, that's not what I meant." Tom was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I just like how you said we. Like you're already part of this. Something in Rachel's chest tightened. Not painfully, but in a way that felt unfamiliar. Hope, maybe. Or possibility. Feelings she'd been avoiding for 8 months because they hurt too much when they didn't work out. I could help you set things up, she said carefully. If you want. As a consultant. What do consultants charge? Usually a lot more than you can probably afford, Tom grinned. So what's the friends and family discount? I don't know. What are you making for lunch? They ate in the garage, sitting at a makeshift table made from a sheet of plywood balanced on 2 sawhorses. The Cuban sandwiches were actually incredible, pressed and hot and stuffed with roasted pork and ham and pickles. Tom had also brought black beans and rice, which he served in paper bowls with plastic forks. My mom would kill me if she saw us eating like this, he said, gesturing to the plastic forks and paper towels serving as napkins. She's very serious about proper dining. It tastes amazing, Rachel said and meant it. Where'd you learn to cook like this? My mom. She says cooking is like mechanics. Follow the steps, pay attention, and don't rush the process. He took a bite of his sandwich. She wanted me to be a lawyer. Had this whole plan. I was supposed to go to law school, work for a big firm, make lots of money. What happened? My dad had a heart attack when I was 23. Right there in the shop, working on a transmission. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. Tom's voice was steady, but Rachel could hear the old grief underneath. The shop was his whole life. He'd built it from nothing. I couldn't let it die with him. So I left school, came home, and tried to figure out how to be a mechanic. That must have been hard. It was terrible. I didn't know anything about running a business. I barely knew anything about fixing cars beyond what my dad had taught me when I was a kid. The first year, I almost lost everything. Eddie Jr.'s dad, Eddie Sr., he helped me, taught me everything he knew, sat with me when I wanted to quit. Tom looked around the shop. Some days I still feel like I'm pretending, like someone's going to walk in and realize I have no idea what I'm doing. Rachel understood that feeling more than she wanted to admit. I felt like that running my company. Every investor meeting, every pitch, I was sure someone would figure out I was just making it up as I went along. Were you? Mostly, she smiled. Turns out that's what everyone's doing. We're all just pretending we know what we're doing and hoping it works. Out. They finished lunch while Danny and Carlos argued about the best way to fix a transmission issue on the Civic. Eddie Jr. gave up on the computer and went back to paper, muttering about technology being the enemy of progress. The radio played classic rock at a reasonable volume, and Rachel realized she felt more relaxed than she had in months. Around 3 o'clock, Tom had to get back to work. A customer was coming to pick up their car. But before Rachel left, he walked her out to her van. So, he said, "Can I ask you something personal?" Rachel tensed slightly. Okay, do you miss it? Running your company, being the boss. All of that. It was such a direct question without any of the tiptoeing that people usually did around her condition that Rachel found herself answering honestly. Every single day. I miss feeling useful. I miss solving problems. I miss the part of my brain that felt sharp and quick and capable. She looked down at her hands. After the accident, everyone kept telling me I was strong and brave. But I didn't feel strong. I felt useless. Like the only thing I'd ever been good at was taken away. Tom nodded slowly. My dad used to say that tools don't stop being useful just because you have to use them differently. A wrench is still a wrench even if you have to hold it with both hands instead of one. More mechanic wisdom? It's all I've got, he smiled. But seriously, Rachel, you spent the last 3 hours fixing problems you didn't even know existed in a business you don't own. You're still sharp. You're still capable. You're just doing it from a chair instead of standing up. The tool didn't change, just how you're holding it. Rachel felt her throat tighten. She'd heard 100 platitudes about her disability, about how she was an inspiration, about how things would get better, about how she just needed to stay positive. But this was the first time someone had talked about her actual abilities, not just her limitations. Thanks, she managed. Thank you. For real. You gave me more useful advice in 3 hours than I've gotten in 3 years of watching YouTube videos. Tom pulled out his phone. Can I text you? About the organizing thing. And maybe about other stuff too. Yeah, you can text me. Rachel drove home with her mind buzzing. She kept thinking about Tom's words. The tool didn't change. Just how you're holding it. It was such a simple way to look at everything that had felt so complicated and overwhelming. That night she opened her laptop. She hadn't touched it in weeks except to send a few emails to her business partners, but now she opened a fresh document and started typing. She made a list of everything Tom needed to do to get his business organized. She researched inventory management software and made notes on the pros and cons of each option. She sketched out a basic business plan for expanding to a second location, including startup costs and projected revenue. It was past midnight when she finally stopped. Her back hurt from sitting in her wheelchair too long. She needed to transfer to bed and do her stretches. But for the first time in 8 months, the pain felt worth it. Because she'd spent the evening using her brain for something other than rehashing the accident or imagining all the things she'd lost. Her phone buzzed. A text from Tom. "You asleep yet?" "Probably. Sorry for late text. Just wanted to say today was really great. You're really great at this business stuff. Also at eating Cuban sandwiches. Important skill." Rachel smiled in the darkness of her bedroom. She typed back, still awake. "I made you a list of things to fix. It's long. You're going to hate me. Impossible. Send the list. I'll start tomorrow. It's going to take weeks." "Good. Gives you a reason to keep coming back to the shop." Rachel stared at that message for a long time. Keep coming back. Like it was a given. Like he wanted her there. Not because he felt sorry for her, but because she was actually helpful. Actually needed. Same time next week. She typed, "It's a date. I mean, not a date, unless you want it to be a date. Which is fine either way. I'm going to stop texting now before I make this worse." Rachel laughed, actually laughed, and typed back a single word. "Good night." She plugged her phone in and transferred to her bed. Her physical therapy exercises were laid out on the nightstand, the routine she was supposed to do every night and usually skipped because what was the point? Tonight, she did them. All of them. Because tomorrow she was going to wake up and send Tom that list. And next week she was going to go back to the shop, and maybe, just maybe, she was going to figure out how to hold the wrench differently. The tool hadn't changed. She had. And for the first time since the accident, that felt like it might be okay. Rachel started going to the shop twice a week. Then 3 times. By the 3rd week of November, she was there almost every afternoon. Her wheelchair parked in Tom's tiny office while she reorganized his entire business system from the ground up. It wasn't supposed to become this. She'd agreed to help him get organized, maybe offer some advice on expansion. Simple consultant work. But somewhere between teaching him how to use inventory software and explaining the difference between cash flow and profit, it had become something else. Something that felt less like work and more like belonging. Tom's crew had accepted her presence with the casual ease of people who'd seen stranger things in their garage. Danny started asking her advice about his own side business detailing cars. Carlos brought her coffee every morning, exactly how she liked it, which meant Tom had been paying attention and told him. Eddie Jr. showed her pictures of his grandkids and complained about his daughter-in-law, with the comfortable assumption that Rachel cared, which she found herself actually doing. It was Lisa who finally said something. They met for lunch at a cafe near Rachel's apartment, the first time Rachel had initiated plans with anyone since the accident. "You look different," Lisa said, studying Rachel across the table. "I can't figure out what it is. Different how? I don't know. Lighter? Less like you're carrying the world on your shoulders?" Lisa took a sip of her tea. "The mechanic thing is going well, I take it?" Rachel felt herself smile without meaning to. "His name is Tom, and yeah, it's going well. I've been helping him reorganize his business systems. He's actually pretty good at what he does, he just had no structure." "Uh-huh." Lisa's expression was knowing. "And how's Tom doing?" "What do you mean?" "Rachel, come on. You've been to his shop how many times now? 15, 20? I don't know. I'm not counting. You're definitely counting." Lisa leaned forward. "So what's happening? Are you two dating?" "No." Rachel said it too quickly. "It's not like that. I'm helping him with his business." "That's all? That's all?" "Yes." Lisa gave her a look that said she wasn't buying it, but she dropped the subject. They talked about other things. Lisa's job at the marketing firm. Her ongoing disaster of a dating life. The fact that Rachel's business partners had been asking when she might come back to the office, even just for meetings. But after lunch, sitting in her van in the parking lot, Rachel found herself thinking about Lisa's question. What was happening with Tom? They texted every day. She spent hours at his shop. They ate lunch together more often than not. They laughed. They talked about things that had nothing to do with business, but it wasn't dating. Dating was what happened between people who were both whole. People who could go to movies and restaurants without checking if there was wheelchair access. People who didn't need to plan every outing around bathroom availability and energy levels, and whether the pain would be manageable that day. Tom deserved someone who could meet him without complications. Someone who could walk into his shop without needing a ramp. Someone whose body worked the way it was supposed to. Rachel's phone buzzed. A text from Tom, "Where are you? Carlos made too much food and we're drowning in tamales. Save us." She stared at the message. She should go home. She'd already been to the shop 4 times this week. She was spending too much time there, getting too comfortable, letting herself feel things she had no business feeling, but her hands were already typing. On my way. When she arrived at the shop 20 minutes later, Tom was waiting outside. He'd been doing that lately, coming out to meet her van, walking beside her as she wheeled inside. Never helping unless she asked, just being present. It was such a small thing, but it made Rachel feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. Carlos's mom is convinced we're all starving, Tom explained as they headed inside. She sent enough tamales to feed a small army. We've been trying to eat them for 3 hours and we've barely made a dent. The break room table was indeed covered in foil-wrapped tamales. Carlos sat in the corner looking slightly ill. I can't eat another bite, he groaned. I've had 7 tamales. I'm going to turn into a tamale. You're weak, Danny said, unwrapping his 4th. These are amazing. Take some home, Carlos begged Rachel. Please. My mom will send more tomorrow and I'll die. Rachel ended up with a bag of 12 tamales, which was ridiculous because she lived alone and couldn't possibly eat that many. But Carlos looked so relieved that she agreed. Walk with me? Tom asked after she'd finished eating. I want to show you something. They went out through the back of the shop into a small lot that Rachel had never seen before. There was a building there, older than the main shop, with peeling paint and boarded-up windows. This used to be my dad's first location, Tom explained, before he moved to the bigger shop. It's been sitting empty for 5 years. I kept meaning to sell it, but I never got around to it. He looked at the building with an expression Rachel couldn't quite read. I've been thinking about your advice, about expanding. And I was thinking maybe instead of opening somewhere new, I could renovate this place, turn it into a second location. Rachel studied the building. It was small, maybe 2 bays maximum, but the location was good on a busy street with plenty of parking. It would be cheaper than buying new property, she said, her mind already running calculations. And you'd have the advantage of owning it outright. No rent, no landlord? That's what I thought. Tom walked closer to the building. But I don't know if I'm ready. Opening a second location, that's huge. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough to run 2 shops? Rachel heard the fear in his voice, the same fear she'd felt before every major decision with her own company. The fear that came from caring deeply about something and knowing you could lose it. You won't be doing it alone, she said. You've got your crew. They're solid. And you've got systems in place now. Real systems, not just hope and guessing. I've got you, Tom said quietly. Rachel's heart did something complicated in her chest. I'm just a consultant. You're not, though. Tom turned to face her. You're here almost every day. You know my business better than I do at this point. You care about whether we succeed. That's not a consultant. That's a partner. The word hung in the air between them. Partner, it meant so many things. Business partner. Life partner. Person who sticks around. Tom, I can't, Rachel started, but he held up a hand. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just saying what's true. You've helped me more in 6 weeks than anyone else has in 3 years. You made me believe I could actually do this expansion thing. You made me believe I wasn't crazy for wanting more. He ran a hand through his hair. A gesture Rachel had learned meant he was nervous. I know you're dealing with a lot. I know this year has been terrible for you. But being around you, it's the best part of my day. Every day. And I needed you to know that. Rachel's throat felt tight. She wanted to say something perfect. Something that would match the honesty of what Tom had just given her. But all she could manage was, it's the best part of my day too. Tom smiled, that easy smile that had first caught her off guard in the cafe 6 weeks ago. Yeah? Yeah. They stood there in the empty lot behind a run-down building, and Rachel felt something shift. Not dramatically. Not like in movies where everything suddenly makes sense. Just a quiet realization that she'd been protecting herself from this exact moment, from the vulnerability of admitting she cared about someone, and all that protection had done was make her lonely. "So," Tom said eventually, "you want to help me figure out how to renovate this disaster?" "Absolutely." They spent the next hour walking through the building, taking notes on what needed to be fixed. It was extensive. New electrical, new plumbing, new everything, basically. But Rachel could see the potential. With the right renovations, it could be a perfect second location. "This is going to cost a fortune," Tom said, looking at Rachel's growing list of necessary repairs. "Probably, but it's an investment. You'll make it back." She made another note. "We should get contractors in here for estimates. And you'll need to figure out financing. A business loan probably, unless you've got savings." "I've got some savings. Not enough for this, but some." Tom looked around the empty building. "My dad would have loved this. Seeing the business grow. Having 2 locations." "Tell me about him," Rachel said. "Your dad. What was he like?" Tom leaned against the wall, and for the next 20 minutes he talked. About his father's laugh, loud enough to hear from across the shop. About how he'd come to America with nothing and built a business through sheer stubbornness and skill. About how he taught Tom that honest work and good service would always win over flashy advertising. About the heart attack that came without warning. How Tom had found him on the shop floor. How he'd tried CPR and called 911 and held his father's hand while they waited for an ambulance that came too late. Rachel listened without interrupting, understanding the need to talk about grief with someone who wouldn't try to fix it or minimize it. "The first year after he died was the worst year of my life," Tom said. "Worse than anything before or since. I'd wake up every morning and forget he was gone. Then I'd remember and have to lose him all over again, and the shop was falling apart because I didn't know what I was doing, and I kept thinking I was letting him down, that he'd trusted me with his life's work and I was destroying it." "But you didn't destroy it," Rachel said softly. "You saved it. You built it into something better, with a lot of help." Tom looked at her. Eddie Sr., he was there every day that first year. Teaching me, keeping me from making huge mistakes, sitting with me when I wanted to quit. He died 2 years ago. Heart problems, same as my dad. And I realized that the people who save you, they don't always stay, but that doesn't make what they gave you any less real." Rachel understood what he was saying without him saying it directly, that she had saved something in him too, that her presence mattered, and that even if she left tomorrow, even if this thing between them never became more than business advice and tamales in a garage, it would still have been real. Still have mattered. "I had a panic attack in the grocery store last month," Rachel heard herself say. The words came out before she could stop them. "I was in the cereal aisle and this woman was staring at me. Not even rudely, just curious. And suddenly I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just sat there in my wheelchair having a complete breakdown over cornflakes." Tom didn't say anything, just listened. "I haven't told anyone that. Not Lisa, not my therapist, nobody. Because I was so embarrassed. Because I'm supposed to be strong and brave and inspiring, right? That's what everyone keeps telling me. But I'm not. I'm terrified all the time. Terrified that this is it. That I'll never be more than the wheelchair, that I'll never feel like myself again." "And now?" Tom asked. Rachel took a breath. "Now I still get scared. But when I'm at your shop, when I'm working on these business problems and eating Carlos's mom's tamales, and listening to Danny and Eddie Jr. argue about literally everything, I forget to be scared. I forget that I'm supposed to be broken. I just am." "You were never broken," Tom said. "You were just using different tools." Rachel felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "You can't keep saying perfect things. It's not fair." "Who said I'm trying to be fair?" But Tom was smiling. They locked up the building and headed back to the main shop. It was getting late, almost 6 o'clock. Carlos and Eddie Jr. had already left. Danny was finishing up the last car of the day. "You need help loading those tamales?" Tom asked as they reached Rachel's van. "I think I can manage a bag of food." "Right. Stupid question." Tom shoved his hands in his pockets. "So, same time Thursday?" "Actually," Rachel said, surprising herself, "I was thinking maybe we could meet somewhere else." "Not the shop," Tom's eyebrows rose. "Yeah, where?" "I don't know. Dinner maybe. A real restaurant, not just eating in the garage." Her heart was beating too fast. "If you want to. We could talk about the expansion plans. And other stuff." She watched Tom's face carefully, half expecting him to make an excuse, to realize that taking a woman in a wheelchair to a restaurant was more complicated than it was worth. that they were fine as they were, business colleagues who happened to eat lunch together sometimes. But Tom just smiled, that genuine smile that reached his eyes. I'd love that. Thursday at 7? There's this Puerto Rican place near my apartment. They've got the best mofongo you've ever tasted. And before you ask, yes, it's accessible. The owner's daughter uses a wheelchair. He's got ramps and everything. You checked? I always check now. Tom said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like considering her needs was just part of how he moved through the world now. Rachel's chest felt too full. Thursday at 7, she drove home with the bag of tamales on the passenger seat and her mind spinning. This was a date. An actual date. Not a business meeting at a cafe or working together in his shop. A real dinner date at a restaurant. She should have been terrified. She should have been thinking of all the ways it could go wrong, all the reasons why this was a bad idea. Instead, she found herself thinking about what to wear, whether she should tell Lisa, if Tom would hold her hand across the table or if that was too much too soon. Her phone rang as she pulled into her apartment complex. Lisa's name on the screen. Hey, Rachel answered. Don't hey me. You sound weird. What happened? How do you know something happened? Because I've known you for 12 years and I can hear it in your voice. Spill. Rachel parked and let the silence stretch for a moment. Then she said, Tom asked me to dinner. A real dinner. And I said yes. Lisa's shriek was loud enough that Rachel had to pull the phone away from her ear. Oh my God. Finally, I knew it when. Thursday. Thursday? That's 2 days away. We need to go shopping. You need a new outfit. Something that says I'm amazing and you're lucky to have dinner with me, but also says I'm casual about this and definitely not freaking out. I don't need a new outfit. You absolutely need a new outfit. I'm coming over tomorrow. We're doing this properly. After Lisa hung up, still talking about clothes and makeup and how she'd known all along that Tom was perfect for Rachel, Rachel sat in her van and let herself feel it. The nervousness and excitement and fear and hope all mixed together. For 8 months, she'd been convinced her life was over. That the accident had taken everything that mattered. But sitting here with a bag of tamales and a dinner date with a mechanic who made her laugh, who saw her instead of her wheelchair, who believed she was still capable and useful and maybe even special, Rachel realized something. Her life hadn't ended. It had just changed direction. And maybe that wasn't the worst thing that could have happened. Maybe, just maybe, it was exactly what she needed. Rachel changed her outfit 3 times before Lisa finally took the clothes out of her hands and picked something herself. A deep blue sweater that brought out Rachel's eyes and black pants that looked professional but not too formal. Simple, comfortable, perfect. You look beautiful, Lisa said, stepping back to admire her work. And before you start spiraling, remember that Tom already likes you. He's seen you in work clothes covered in dust from his office. He's seen you eat tamales with grease on your hands. This isn't about impressing him. This is about you two finally admitting what's already there. What if I'm reading this wrong? Rachel asked, staring at herself in the mirror. What if he just sees me as a friend? A business consultant? Rachel. Lisa sat down on the bed and gave her a look. The man checks every restaurant to make sure it's wheelchair accessible before he suggests it. He literally restructured his entire business because you told him to. He looks at you like you hung the moon. Trust me. He doesn't see you as just a